I took the biggest, stinkiest poop on my best friend's wedding dress, and you'll never guess why. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My aunt died a couple months ago, so I went home for the funeral. This meant that my husband was going to be alone for about 2 weeks. Anytime I travel in preparation to leave my husband alone, I will go ahead and cook him gourmet meals for the 2 weeks that I'm gone. Make his breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then I put everything in the freezer. Even prepare his stupid smoothie packets so that he can just pull them out of the fridge and put them in the blender with some milk. Spent 2 days in the kitchen. I get on my flight, go see my family. And while I'm grieving the loss of my aunt, my husband keeps calling me to ask me about his stupid meals and how long he should microwave each thing. After the 2 weeks, I come home and my husband tells me that I need to step outside the house with him. He sits me down and lets me know that he wants a separation. Why? Because he fell in love with the next door neighbor, aka my best friend, the house we go to every Friday for dinner. And the most unbelievable part of all this, he tells me that he expects me to move out of our beautiful house that we built together in 2 days. Part 2 is so good, you gotta go watch it. I took a poo on my best friend's wedding dress. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When my husband informed me that he was leaving me for my best friend who was our neighbor, and that he expected me to move out in 2 days, I was in actual shock. It's as if I saw my whole life flashing before my eyes. I had been married to this man for 20 years, had a child together who was now an adult, but the way in which he broke the news was so insensitive. How do you just bring somebody outside of your house and tell them, by the way, I'm in love with a neighbor and you gotta leave in 2 days? I tried to convince him if we could work things out, if we could go to couples therapy, but he put his foot down and said absolutely not. And of course I told him I was not going to leave our house. That house is like a museum, covered in artwork from all the places I've traveled to. And that house was literally built by us, by our own hands. So for 2 weeks, he and I lived in the same house, while the neighbor wouldn't even come out of her house to face me. Texted her and asked her if we could talk, and she said that she had nothing to say to me, and that her business was with my husband now. Can you believe it actually does get worse? I come home one day to find her cooking in our kitchen. Part 3 is I pooped on my best friend's wedding dress. It's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I walk in to find my best friend, the woman that my husband has been cheating on me with, cooking in our house. Now the thing is, they didn't expect me to be home from work so soon. I just got a feeling that I really should have gone home, and I did. As soon as she sees me, she takes the apron off and leaves. She was too much of a coward to face me. I gotta remind you, at this point, she hadn't even spoken to me yet. I let her leave. When I told my husband that he couldn't bring her around like that, he told me that I was being unreasonable. Finally, after 2 weeks, he moved into her house. This meant that we were still neighbors. A month later, they announced their engagement. I don't know what came over me, but I went into their house and I saw the dress on the bed. I stood over it, I took a poo, and I left. By the way, he and I were still technically married, so they had a spiritual wedding. And he can't file for divorce because he knows I can take half of everything. Definitely know it's me who pooped on the dress, so they try to avoid me at all cost. And she ended up buying another wedding dress. On the day of the wedding dress, I ended up calling the cops to complain about the noise. And they came and stopped the wedding. What else should I do? My boyfriend's girl best friend told me that they hooked up. The real question is, why did she tell me that? And wait until I tell you what else she told me. Okay, let's call my boyfriend Nick. Nick and I have only been together for 3 months, but we worked together 2 years ago, and since then he's always texted me, he's always followed me on Instagram, watched all my stories, and at least once a month he would ask me out to go on a date, but I kept saying no. Because we worked together, I thought it would be completely inappropriate. Number one, I love my job. Number two, I don't shit where I sleep. We both work in marketing and we get paid pretty good money, so there is no way I'm gonna ever jeopardize that. And the thing is, I actually did start liking him. We had great conversations at work. Team and I usually would get dinner every Friday, and he and I would just gravitate towards each other every single time. I had just gotten out of a really toxic relationship. The last thing I wanted was to start dating a coworker. But he ended up moving to another company. He called me and said, hey, we don't work together anymore. Give me a chance. And I did. The first thing we did was go out to meet his group of best friends, including Bethany, his biggest fan, his girl best friend. Bethany hugged me so hard, I thought I was gonna suffocate. Part two is that boyfriend's girl best friend told me they hooked up on the very first night that I met her. When I met Bethany, she hugged me so hard, I thought I was gonna suffocate. Very first thing she said to me was, oh my god, I didn't think you were gonna be that pretty. And she smacks my boyfriend in the back and says, why didn't you tell me she was gonna be so pretty? And the five of us left. Boyfriend had me meet all of his best friends at the bar that night. Let me just say this, there were two other girls who were so nice and kind to me, but Bethany was just on a whole other level of cringe. Before I know it, she monopolized me. She took me away from the group and took me to the bar. Without hesitation, she starts telling me about how they hooked up once, and only once, and that she thought it was important to tell me so that we could just get it out of the way. Then she looks me up and down and says, oh my gosh, you are so not his type. When I asked her what his type was, she started describing herself. Tall, skinny, blonde, fake tan. Well, I'm a short, curvy redhead. She immediately let me know that he probably wasn't even attracted to me really, and that he was probably more attracted to her. Next words out of her mouth were, oh my gosh, he is such a slut, by the way, you're gonna have to be careful. And she starts listing off all the things he did to his past girlfriends. Babe, part 3 3 is up. My boyfriend's girl best friend told me they hooked up the first night I met her. Real reason is, why is she telling me this? After she told me that I wasn't his type, she also blurted out that I needed to be careful with him because he had a tendency to be slutty. Now, in her peewee-sized brain, she thought she was giving me girl tips. You and I know that she was doing a really good job at exposing herself. She told me he cheated on his last girlfriend with his ex, and that I can tell he's cheating on me if he starts hiding his phone or if he starts ghosting me. Because I'm smart and she's not, I let her continue to word vomit. This is when she asked me if I was going to go on the next trip with them. Apparently the 5 of them go on an annual trip. She told me not to say anything because he would probably surprise me with airline tickets. On the way back to our table, she put the cherry on top. She said by the time they were 30, if they hadn't gotten married, they had both agreed to just be together. That they would buy a little cottage somewhere and just live out their lives. Later that night, I broke up with my boyfriend. I told him everything his best friend said. He begged me to forgive her because she was in love with him and that they all knew it. He told me I would never have to see her face again. He's waiting for me to give him another chance. Now, do you think I should give him another chance or just say bye? My best friend only keeps me around because I'm fat. Disclaimer, this is not my story time with sending me on Instagram. I've always been the chunky, pudgy, overweight, chubby girl in the group. Now, our friend group consisted of 4 girls in high school. Once we graduated college, 3 of us stuck together while the other one was kind of out. Then the other 2 girls in the group got boyfriends, and I was on my own. Eventually, they stopped reaching out to me and it was like I didn't even exist. Let me be very clear about something. I have accepted that I'm the chunky girl of the group. I never get jealous. I do not envy them. They are all very attractive and skinny, but I just don't care about that. I'm happy that they love their bodies, but I feel okay in mine. But of course, I knew that I needed to get healthier, so I signed up to the gym. Around this time, one of my girlfriends broke up with her boyfriend and she started coming around again. And I accepted her friendship again, but I told her that it hurt my feelings that she completely ignored me once she got a boyfriend. She promised that she would never do it again, and we started going to the gym together. She's the one that always gets hits on. The guys compliment her. It's like I don't even exist. In fact, they ask me for her number when she doesn't want to give it to them. You see where this is going? Decided to get dressed up all cute and we went to a bar together. Babe, part 2 is up. You gotta go watch. My best friend only keeps me around because I'm fat and I make her look good. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when she invited me to go to our favorite bar. As usual, she always invites me to go to her place to get ready. Nope, she can never come to mine. So I lugged all my clothes and makeup all the way to her place. And as we're getting ready, she starts suggesting that I change my outfit. I felt really cute in my outfit. It was a sleek black blazer with the matching bottoms, tight black tank top, and gold jewelry. But as soon as she saw my outfit, she said I looked way too formal. And then she spent the next 30 minutes trying to convince me to change and put on one of her tight-ass dresses. I asked her if she was in her right mind, considering her dress wouldn't even fit my right thigh. Then she said that I needed to calm down and that we should just go get drinks. And then she ended up copying my outfit. She wore a gray blazer with skinny jeans. When we get to the bar, I started having fun right away. I saw one of my besties from work. Her and I get along so well. This is when I noticed my bestie was really quiet. But as usual, she's only waiting for a guy to come hit on her. Finally, some random dude comes up to her and asks her if she wants a drink. She's like, "Oh my god, thank you so much." Then she looks at me and says, "It's always good to have you around, you know." Part 3 is up. My bestie only keeps me around because I'm fat and I make her look good. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Let's send me on Instagram. That's when she tells me that it's always good having me around, you know? And I did not know what she meant at the time. When the random guy shows up with her drink, and then she does the thing that she always does. She flirts with these guys, puts her hand on their shoulder, tends to laugh at their stupid, nasty ass jokes, in the hopes of getting a second drink. Me, on the other hand, was dancing and having fun with my coworker. That's when the random guy says, "Hey you need to tell your best friend to give me her phone number." And I responded, "I mean, she will if she thinks you're hot." That's when my best friend whispers into this guy's ear, but loud enough for me to hear, "Oh, she's just upset because I'm the one that gets hit on and not her. You know, because she's a little bit chubby." It didn't even make me angry. I already knew she thought this, but it stung. Like the fatty I am, I invited my coworker to a nice dinner. I left my bestie at the bar without a car. I also sent her a text saying, "I heard what you said about me to the guy, and if that's what you really think about me, then this is not a friendship I need to be pursuing." The next morning, I had about 20 missed calls from her, and so I blocked her. If she really wanted to, she could have come to my house. Do you think I did the right thing? Self-care sister out. I found out my boyfriend didn't use protection when he cheated on me. If you want to send me your story time, slide into my DMs. I ran through boyfriend is a slut. 2 years ago, we met through friends at a party. He was asking for my number before he even knew my name. To be perfectly blunt, I thought he was kind of ugly. Wasn't anything particularly special about him. He wasn't well-spoken or intelligent. Wasn't good-looking. He didn't have a high-paying job. The only good quality I found in him that night was that he made me laugh. Not just once, but basically the entire night. I really underestimated just how much a man making me laugh made me feel good. So I gave the poor ugly guy a chance. I gave him my number. 2 weeks later, I get a stupid dumb text from him. "Hey, do you want to go out to brunch?" And I said sure. He ends up taking me to brunch in Lavo, NYC. If you know Lavo, you know that it's basically like a club in the morning, but with brunch food. So he got a couple of drinks in me, and before I knew it, he started looking pretty. And bam, he went in for a kiss, and I let him. A month later, we were together. But I caught him texting one of his exes. I broke up with him. We got back together. I caught him talking to another girl on Instagram. We broke up. We got back together. Then he was on his best behavior for a couple of months. Go to part 2, it's already up. I found out my ran-through boyfriend didn't use protection when he cheated on me. If you want to send me your story time, slide into my DMs. Let me remind you, he was the ugly guy I gave a chance. After the third time I caught him talking to a girl on Instagram, I broke things off, but then he was on his best behavior, so we got back together. This is where I severely underestimated him. You see, because I thought he was a little bit ugly, didn't have a high-paying job, wasn't particularly smart, but he could make me laugh, just didn't think he was able to get girls, especially not ones that were willing to take off their clothes in front of him. But one day I catch him scratching his thingy. Like, a lot, you know? Not normal. So I ask him, what is wrong with you? Then he starts to cry and breaks down. He says that he cheated on me with a girl and that he did not use protection. So right then and there, I took myself to the doctor and I got myself tested, and thank God I did not catch whatever he had. Turns out he has crabs. Google that at your own risk. Do you think he even apologized to me? Nope. In fact, he ghosted me. Called him and texted and he blocked me. I went to his apartment and he wouldn't let me in. This is what I get for giving the ugly guy a chance. He didn't even care for my own safety. He wasn't even gonna tell me about it. Now, how should I get revenge?
My boyfriend sent my nudes to everybody we know, and my parents kicked me out of my house. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I come from a really small Mexican town. Everybody knows everybody. Now, when my boyfriend started to pursue me, I was 17 and he was 23. Not only was he chasing me, he hounded me down. He was turning over rocks just to find me. I have to be honest, I did hide from him a couple of times because he was so intimidating and so intense. Exactly 1 week later, he convinced me to go out on a date. And on that date, I realized he was actually okay. And we were inseparable after that. But I told him that we had to keep our relationship a secret. My parents were really against me dating. Now, for weeks, he tried to convince me that we should do it, but I just wasn't convinced, and I didn't really even want to, so why would I? And of course, he started saying that if I didn't, it meant that I didn't love him, so I promised him that on my 18th birthday, I would do it with him. So on my 18th birthday, we did it. While it was happening, he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of everything. At first, I said no, but he said that it was for him for later use. So I let him take the pictures. Babe, I'm sorry, but you gotta go to part 2. Bye. My boyfriend sent my nudes to everybody we know, and my parents kicked me out of my house. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. He begged on his knees if he could take those pictures, and I let him because we were in the moment, you know? And by the way, that was the only time we had ever done it. I just had a feeling that something bad was gonna happen. Around this time, he started insisting that we get engaged. Keep in mind, I had just turned 18 and he was 23. And if my parents even found out that I might have a boyfriend, it would have meant the end of the world for me. So I kept saying no. And this is when he started accusing me of trying to get with other guys or trying to look single, and he actually didn't believe that my parents wouldn't want me to be in a relationship. And after a couple of days, he started threatening to tell my parents that he was with me, and even worse, that we had done it. He thought my parents were just going to make us get married. He left me no other choice, so I broke up with him. And the very next day, I wake up to tons of messages on my phone, and when I opened the first one, my stomach sank to my ass. It was all of my nudes posted all over Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, and everybody was sharing it on WhatsApp. And my parents were waiting for me in the dining room. I'm sorry, babe, go to part 3. My boyfriend sent my nudes to everybody we know, and my parents kicked me out of my house. This is when I wake up to an obscene amount of messages. The pictures were circulating around Facebook, being shared all over WhatsApp. And worst of all, my parents are waiting for me in the dining room. Not only are they angry, they are so disappointed in me that I would give myself to a man and that I would let him take pictures. And unfortunately, in my background, women are labeled as whores so easily. My dad started calling me a whore, and so did my 2 brothers. My mom tried her best to defend me. My dad kicked me out of the house. I immediately called my boyfriend, and of course, he blocked me. Thankfully, my best friend had my back. Her parents let me move into their house. Now, everyone in our town treats me like trash. The cashiers at the supermarket told me that I ruined my life. 2 boys at my school started harassing me, and one of my teachers is giving me the silent treatment. Even the lady at the smoothie bar, she told me to get out because I was a bad influence on everyone in there. I feel like my life is completely ruined, and I'm only 18. Finally, my ex decided to reach out, but not to apologize, only to tell me that I needed to be careful because some guys were planning on essaying me when they caught me alone. After 6 months, I went back to my parents and I apologized. And my dad was more calm, so he was able to listen to me. And they took me to the police so we could file a report against my ex. But guess what? The police laughed in our faces. They said to just let it go. What should I do?
Storytime about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. I'll tell you that last month I made $60,000. It's clear this is not my story time, and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, I am JoJo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powders, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about.
fashion hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. Then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. Told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, do you ever exercise? I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, do you ever exercise? I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, no, seriously, do you ever exercise? I said, sometimes. Then he told me, you should really try to work out at least 5 times a week. I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, you know, you wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food, and if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you. I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, you know, I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you. He somehow ended up making me feel bad, and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. One day, he pulls up his shirt and says, look, I have abs. Which, no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, what? And I said, you don't have abs. Then he says, yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you. By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day. That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, wow, those are big words. And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. My clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big, huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance. Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do? Story time about how a strange man abused me because I did not want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. That's when he slid his hand onto my lap. I quickly get up from the table and ask him to leave. That's when he said, why are you freaking out? I'm just trying to get your number. Then I told him that there was absolutely 0 chance I would ever give him my phone number. And he said, oh, you think you have a choice? And he holds out his phone so that I could type in my number. I pushed his phone back and again asked him to leave. And he threatened me and said that he wouldn't leave until I gave him my number. My knees and hands were shaking. Look back at my employees behind the counter and they are scared. That's when one of my employees says, I'm gonna call the cops. And I said, yes, call them. As soon as I turned back to this man, he swings at me. He wasn't able to reach my face, but then he grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me down onto the ground. This all happened in about 30 seconds. As I'm on the ground, he starts slapping me. I covered my face with my arms and I just started kicking at him. And my 2 female employees, who by the way are like 17 and 18, start attacking the guy. And then he starts hitting them. Thankfully, 2 men from the street hear me yelling. I came in and tackled him and the police arrived 2 minutes later. I found out this guy was stalking me for a month. I got a restraining order. Be careful